Stan Stalnaker. No, I'm not back. Now I'm back. Hey, we're back. I'm Stan Stalnaker with Hub Culture. We're here in the Ice House having a conversation about something we call the 1.5, a look at climate change, but in the context of this really specific target. This idea that we as a planet, as a society, cannot go above 1.5 degrees in warming without very serious consequences. So we started off the conversation, of which there are a number of segments on hublive.tv and Facebook Live, looking at what it means, what is it, what are the consequences, can we actually get to this solution, which good news, it turns out we can, and then moving into the technology of how we're actually going to do that, what's possible, and also what we can imagine, what doesn't exist today. So we looked at blockchain, we looked at funding just a little bit, and now we're going to talk about something really cool called the Joint European Disruptive Initiative. This is kind of like DARPA, but a kind of much cooler European version because it's all JEDI, right? So joining me now is André Loesekrug-Pietri, who actually used to live in Corsica, which is one of my favorite places. We're not going to talk about Corsica here, we're going to talk about JEDI. Tell us about this initiative. What's the mission?
First, it's a statement that the Europeans can invent cool names, right? It's not only about GDPR and all these funny acronyms. Basically, what we are building is an initiative that is launching grand challenges to solve most of the big societal problems through technology. So not everything will be solved by technology, but we believe that we need not to have the present and the problems pressured upon us. We need to invent the solutions and to invent the next big things. In healthcare, in environment and energy, but also in the digital world, how do we augment humans and not replace them? And the fourth last big mission we have is what we call New Frontiers, which is oceans and space.
Very cool. You have to come to our space session later at the Tech Lodge. So on the environment front, we have some grand challenges. We have some really big challenges. There's been quite a bit of success in the US with X Prize and the idea of creating big challenges. And then, you have various research and technology, groups that have been great at building generationally defining technologies. Is this Europe's answer to that?
Well, it's not really an answer. I mean, right now in Europe, you have a lot of people who are basically complaining about being left behind, about this technology race that there is, especially between the US and China. At JEDI, which is now thousands of scientists, deep tech startup CEOs across Europe, we believe that it's all about inventing the future. I mean, if Europe indeed is a bit late in autonomous driving, in storage, in research on hydrogen, well, we can either complain, we can either create Fortress Europe, or we can, at the contrary, try to invent the next big thing. And I give you some examples. The digital world is increasingly consuming massive amounts of energy. I mean, we will end up approximately 10% of greenhouse gases coming from the whole digital world, just the streaming industry. Could we imagine data centers?
That's kind of high.
And could we imagine data centers that are consuming a fraction, 5 times less energy? Could we imagine not a lithium-ion battery or a solid state, but how can we double, triple, multiply by 10 energy density? Could we divide by 3 hydrogen production costs? Because right now hydrogen seems to be an interesting solution, but nobody has a clue about making it really viable and competitive. So we need to find these game changers. So for the Europeans, it's a way to leapfrog and to be back in the race, to be in front again. But it's also a way to say that technology is a way to, not just for the elite, but for the larger population to solve our biggest societal problems.
Well, I love that because I feel like my big epiphany of 2019 was that we need to build a globally accessible global digital middle class. And it has to be algorithmically superior. I think that what's happening in tech is that you see compounding returns because of efficiencies, and that's great, but it leads to very, very specific winners and then a multitude of people who are left out. And that's not really a great model for a future society or even for society today, especially as the math of that compounds. And so what you just said is very interesting because it looks like that's a kind of inclusive approach to this technology story. So can you give us some examples
Yeah,
of
I mean,
what you're working on?
we don't want to call it a European way, but it's probably a humanistic way. I mean, it's if we believe that that technology is increasingly having an impact on our societies. I mean, think about how our social media is more and more framing the opinion, how energy is deciding where you allocate capital. You had that in one of your previous sessions. How deep fakes is also changing the way we see truth. Either we can see increasingly authoritarian states who are using technology to be ahead, or you have the liberal democracies who say we need to be on top of the game. And this is a way to say it's not about tech for tech, which sometimes you see in some parts of the world, or it's not tech for political reasons. It's how do you really get the whole society on board. I'll give you a very practical example. This face recognition topic is a huge topic which is bringing a lot of ethical issues with it. Could we imagine a face recognition device which is bringing great benefits? I mean, identification, stealing of identity will become increasingly an issue, and especially for issues not for the small elite, but for those who are not necessarily having the best digital tools. Could we imagine a tool like that, but without the risk of having, for example, a massively centralized database? Today, this is a technology frontier. Nobody knows to create algorithms which you can embed in each of the cameras, but without these cameras being related to one big centralized database. By the way, when DARPA invented the internet, it was also this whole principle, is how do you create a network that is so resilient because it has no center. So it's this whole spirit, and that's why we get inspired from what DARPA has invented, is saying you put some great challenges, but you don't end up with a research paper, you bring it to a prototype state. That then, funds and impact funds, we can name many of them. You have one here represented in the room, which is called Alliance 17. I mean, how do you then scale that with funds? But you need to get this disruptive technology first. And that is what we want to do, because today you realize that most of the investors, they don't invest when there's no business case. But precisely, our societies need to leapfrog, and that's what we do. We invest in everything which is too risky or too long-term, the real moonshots.
Okay, so let's take it back to this, the 1.5 degree imperative. What are you guys working on that you think can help us hit this solution?
Well, the topic about data centers we think is critical. I mean, you probably know right now the two largest streaming entities like Netflix or YouTube are consuming approximately 35% of the bandwidth. So this is just a trend which is going to consume even more. Could we really break that trend that we still have the digital revolution, bringing all the benefits, but decorrelating it with the energy consumption? Could we imagine battery storage that is not just increasing by 10, 20, 30% per year, but can we really have a breakthrough which is not just a progression of the existing? Could we imagine, I mentioned hydrogen before, hydrogen being produced at a fraction of the cost that is produced today? I'm also giving you a topic which is about airlines. I mean, there was this whole movement about shame to name a plane that became very big, especially in Europe a couple of months ago. There has been actually, today, before you will have an electric plane, right now, just to give some numbers, the efficiency of an electric engine or of a battery compared to kerosene, to jet fuel, is 1 to 60. So even if an electric engine is twice as efficient as a jet engine, you still have 1 to 30. That's a huge step.
Yeah,
but actually,
that's not viable.
That's not viable in a predictable future. But actually, there has been relatively little research about increasing massively the efficiency of jet fuel. So one of the challenges we are launching is, can we produce a jet fuel which is at least double as efficient? And as you know, airlines
if you have jet fuel that's twice as efficient, you're having the carbon emissions.
And you still have the carbon emission, but twice less than what you're producing today.
You're having the growth.
Exactly. You still have the growth, and you don't have the competition also with biofuel, which, as we know, has huge unintended consequences, especially the competition between what is used for food and what is used for fuel.
Yeah, and also what is saved for protection. Very interesting. So you mentioned something about this last initiative, and it's a little bit like moving on, but like let's just say, because we're about to end here with our sessions, let's just say we hit this target, 1.5 degrees, we're able to course correct, and we're able to hit the targets that we need to do. You mentioned that you guys are looking at oceans and space. So we get over this challenge, this grand challenge on climate. What do you guys see coming down the pipe? What are you thinking about in those areas?
I'll give you two examples on that makes us very excited. Is on space, for example, increasingly our lives will depend on constellations. So we are right now, hundreds and hundreds of new satellites are brought up in low Earth orbit every year. So the probability of a collision between a very, very crowded space is increasing by the day. How to solve that space debris issue is a massive one. So we're going to launch, so you can either replace a satellite, which is very costly, or you can try to find a way to take all of these debris and just realize there are 700,000 debris of a size larger than a euro coin, which is approximately this. So it's not a question of if, it's a question of when.
And so what happens if a piece of debris the size of a euro coin hits something?
Well, since it's hitting it at several miles a second speed, you can imagine there's first huge risk for the space station and for the astronauts which are inside there, yeah. But also there's increasingly a risk of disruption of our communication systems, and increasingly for Earth observation, because we're very focused on environment here. We depend almost entirely now on space for mobility, obviously for positioning systems, and increasingly to understand where you have issues with humidity, forest fires. I mean, the dramatic bushfires we had in Australia right now, most of the way we were able to at least map them, probably not prevent them, was through satellite. It's not anymore through local observation. Probably the solution where we will be able maybe to anticipate where it's really dry, where you could pre-position firefighting will probably come increasingly from that. So space is incredibly important for us.
And it sounds like that's a component of this. Like if we could pre-position, like anticipate, like climate impact locations, we could actually then work to mitigate them.
I mean, you mentioned Corsica before. I mean, Corsica is a Mediterranean island. It's like Greece, like Portugal, one of the most hit every summer with forest fires. And right now, when you look at it, even with there's a lot of heroism and engagement by firefighters, you have the impression that this forest fire entities are still, we have not really invented something radically new since decades. I mean, you have these water bombers, water planes. You more and more pre-position, but it looks very much helpless. And when you see the scale of these massive fires, the only thing in Australia which was possible was more or less direct them, but you cannot stop them anymore. Yeah. So imagine one of the challenges we would love to launch, and here we're calling for any kind of great idea, because that's how JEDI works, is getting the input of the best scientists, of the best deep tech startup CEOs, of the people who are working also in tech corporates, who help us not be linear in our thinking, is help us think what's the next big thing. What could make a difference in fighting fires? That would be a great challenge to launch.
Fantastic. Well, I look forward to seeing those challenges on the JEDI website, right? It's jedi.group.
Jedi.group, and you can also follow our Twitter account called EuroJEDI. And you will hear about us, because the key when we launch a challenge is to make sure, and that's what DARPA really invented, and so kudos to them, is really make sure that any kind of team, be it big, be it small, be it coming from research or be it coming from the private sector, is treated equally. What we want is the most disruptive ideas and those who make them happen.
So I love this. Thank you so much, André.
Thank you, Stan.
This is great. So, we've got, if you've watched the other sessions that we've had, if you haven't seen them, go to hublive.tv or check out our Facebook page to capture the course of this conversation. But this has been a co-created discussion as we at Hub Culture explore the future society. And I love how this has turned out, because I started off pretty depressed, looking at the consequences of climate change, the difficulty to hit this target. But as we've gone through the conversation with the people in the room, and by the way, this was not pre-planned, this has all emerged here. We co-created this with the people who showed up.
This
I'm
is
actually
not
excited.
planned anymore, so I'm also making you a little gift. So you
thank
become a Jedi.
All right, I love it. That's awesome. We were doing the Jedi Chronicles at the Tech Lodge, so we have to. This is like a theme for the year. So thank you very much.
You're welcome.
And
May the force be with you.
Exactly. I'm excited because we see solutions, we see the money and the financing and the tech that's available, and now we find the organizing institution for groups and challenges. So I think we're ending on a super high note. There is a pathway to success. The imperative is not impossible. So thank you very much. I'm Stan Stalnaker at Hub Culture. We're going to be here in Davos all week, so tune in every day on Facebook. Check out our Instagram at Hub Culture. And by the way, our new friends at TikTok have got us building some crazy stuff over on TikTok. So in all these places, including, what was that thing? Twitter. Remember that? Over there, always at Hub Culture. And then don't forget, membership at hubculture.com and videos at hublive.tv. Catch Edie Lush and the social media team interviewing executives and leaders here at Davos all week long. And then, just hang out with us wherever we are. We'll catch you later. Bye to all of our friends. Please share this. Tell your friends the 1.5 imperative is not impossible. We can do it. We got this.